Hi, everyone. Nice. It's working. Hello. Nice that you are all joining us on this Thursday afternoon. I am Daniela Tenenbaum. I'm a curator at IMPAKT, and I assisted the curators of this festival, Ina Chafers and Ayon Dunevind, with the curation of the festival. Welcome to this event. This is a screening of 2 films by Roee Rosen, followed by a Q&A with Roee. This is very strong. I would like to invite Roee Rosen to say a few words before we start with the screening. We will screen 2 films. The first one is Out from 2010. The second one is The Dust Channel from 2016. And as I said, it will be followed by a Q&A. So remember all of those wonderful questions you have so we can address it all. Roee Rosen will say a few words and we will start. Yeah?
Okay. I will not say much, and usually I don't say anything before films to avoid spoilers. So I thought I'll say something about how each of them came to be very quickly, because they kind of came from other works. I did a film in 2008 called The Confessions of Roee Rosen. I saw my entire career as set against the confessional mode. And in my confessions, there were 3 illegal migrant workers speaking in Hebrew without understanding, being Roee Rosen 1, 2, and 3, like a conduit to my own identity. And I thought confession always is about gaining something, you know, about you have something to gain by confessing. You gain authenticity, you gain a sense of reality, you prove your religion to be right if you're St. Augustine. And then it struck me that the only kind of confession I didn't treat was the one where there was still a divide between the person giving the confession and the person eking it out. So for instance, confession under torture. So this is how Out came to be. My work is often about doubling of the voice, like in Confessions, where someone else speaks Hebrew without understanding it, so it's a kind of a puppet mastery. Here again, there is a kind of a doubling of the voice. I will not say more about that, but the main scene is a kind of BDSM scene in which confession is of a different sort. And as for the second film, The Dust Channel, which was a commission for Documenta 14, it came out of a project called Vladimir's Night, not by me, but one of my fictive characters, Maxim Kumar Mishkin, who was a paranoiac, who believed Putin had a personal vendetta against him. And his magnum opus was a book called Vladimir's Night, in which Putin is being raped, tortured, and eventually killed by animated objects. And this Maxim Kumar Mishkin also had a bunch of people called the Buried Alive Collective, a group of like-minded ex-Soviet artists. And they did a series of animation chants for commodities. So, and this all comes from, Russian constructivism. There was a theorist, Tretyakov, who thought we should write biographies of objects rather than subjects, to fight bourgeois capitalism, etc., etc. And you will see in Out, the first film, a musician in the end, a singer, a very charismatic guy. His name is Igor Kotogolov. And I began working with him on an opera based on Vladimir's Night. And then I felt like I could not deal with the figure of Putin anymore. It was like 5 years of hard work. And the project was deserted. But I felt like I needed to do something with the animation chant and with Igor. Hence, the second work, The Dust Channel, which is a kind of an operetta about the life of one specific special commodity, DC-07, a Dyson vacuum cleaner. But you will see that it has other political, social, and aesthetic layers. I hope you'll enjoy, and I will be happy to answer questions later. I would say one more thing. I was speaking with Daniela about it. I don't know in this day and age whether a trigger warning for this audience is needed, but Out, as I said, is about BDSM. It includes a sadomasochistic scene, frontal nudity. So if you're offended by stuff like that, be warned. Enjoy.
אוקיי. טוב, אז מעט על עצמי, קוראים לי אלה שפירא, אני בת 25 וחצי, כרגע אני ממתינה לפתיחת שנת הלימודים.
Yeah, it's a rather small. Yeah. Can you hear us like this? We do? Okay. I think this one is off. Good. Arjan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Arjan Dunnewind, Director of IMPAKT, co-curator, together with Ine Gevers of the IMPAKT Festival 2024. Deal with it.
Thank you. We have about 20 minutes. I'm looking at Marge for Q&A. I have many questions. I'm sure Arjan also has many questions. But for me, at least, it's very important to give the audience the space to ask and get into dialogue with us. This is a mutual event. So if anyone has a question right now, I am happy to pass the mic. Okay, so we will start.
Take your time.
Yeah.
We'll ask some questions, and by the time you feel confident, just raise your hand.
Yeah. Would you like to ask something?
You can go first,
Yeah.
if you want.
I do actually want to ask you and Ina about the selection of films. I know it's a bit of a meta situation, but I do also want to maybe first, I am from Israel as well as Roee. I think we look at the films from a very certain perspective. I noticed that in both of the films, and also in the Gaza war tattoos, the work that Roee is currently presenting at the IMPAKT Center in the exhibition "The Cake Is a Lie," you use a lot of the traditional media. So a lot of real news excerpts. For example, in Out, in Tse, you mentioned that all of the what the demon is saying is actual, real things that Avigdor Lieberman was also quoted saying. And also in the Dust Channel, Cholot is unfortunately a real place. The news is real. Reported from there. I want to ask you about this use of traditional media in your film.
I'm not sure what you mean by traditional, but I think that it's a mixture of, let's say, fantasy and reality in a way that maybe tries to defy a clear-cut distinction or a binary divide between them, as it does between, let's say, the public, political, social, and the private, the erotic, the aesthetic. I think that my work has always been about trying to create those hybrids that are maybe murky and uncomfortable, but also hopefully seductive and funny. And it's a problem that rises again with each new work, how to invent a new machine to combine those different layers. So, for example, the Dust Channel is the first time that I used found footage. It never happened to me before. The Gaza War Tattoos is the first photography project. So, yeah, I'm originally, you spoke about traditional mediums. I'm a writer and a painter, primarily, but I'm a kind of a disturbed painter, so I always felt like painting needed to justify itself. Why would you produce another fetishistic, beautiful, two-dimensional, colorful object? And then I would paint when I would find an excuse. And the same with, I guess, films and photography. There needs to be some kind of machinery that is invented structurally that I haven't seen before. And usually it is about combining different things that seemingly do not fit together. Maybe they don't fit together. Another thing that I wanted to say, I'm not sure it's related to your question, but it feels so odd now to look at a film with Netanyahu speaking about refuge seekers. I mean, these were things that were so shocking merely 8 years ago and now seem like little, petty crimes compared to what's going on currently. But I think that, xenophobia and refuge seekers is not only an Israeli problem. So in that sense, I think there is something that extends beyond the Israeli context.
Is it okay if I?
Well, my question I have connects maybe a little bit to your question on traditional media. I mean, what also strikes me in all of your work is that it's so full of references. Sometimes by using found footage, like in this case. We exhibited Vladimir's Night at IMPAKT, where we even displayed all the references, which, I mean, makes it to me a joy to watch all of your work, because it's nice to see, well, probably all of you recognize maybe Un Chien Andalou, the Louis Buñuel film. There's other reference, which I'm just guessing they might be totally false, but at least it opens a lot of doors in your mind. In general, why is it just that you have the same joy of connecting all kinds of dots in cultural history, or can you say a bit more about why there's so many layers of references, how you use them, what you...
I mean, I don't want to sound professorial about it, but I think that, I grew up with this kind of modernist legacy where you need to invent yourself, and you invent yourself out of nothing, especially in American modernism, the Greenbergian model, so Jackson Pollock just stands out of thin air, with no precursors. And it's not that I don't believe in originality or in individuality, but I think that we are always already inscribed, and made by former things and by contexts. So it is important for me, as eccentric as my work sometimes may be, to not only pay homage, but to make clear that these are really structural backbones of the work. So, for example, truly in the Dust Channel, I think it's very clear for people who know cinema that Chien Andalou is not only a reference, it's a blueprint. The entire film is premised on Andalusian Dog by Dali and Buñuel, which is also interesting because this film is a musical, but it's also silent. There's no Foley, there's no dialogue. All the sound is really the soundtrack. So in that sense, it's also a silent film. And then the second really important reference is for Dusan Makaveyev, The Mystery of the Organisms, the beautiful song in the end, beautiful but also shlocky, Yesenin, Letter to Mama, is a reference to W.R., The Mystery of the Organism, which is a fantastic film, if you haven't seen it, by Dusan Makaveyev. A really great combination of radical politics, sexuality, documentary and fiction. And in that film that deals with the figure of Wilhelm Reich, this very eccentric and radical student of Freud, the end scene, in the end, there is this very handsome Russian ice skater who kills a Yugoslavian activist, Arachian activist, and then there is a beautiful, almost one shot. There's one cut, but it's a port scene of, his hands are bloodied. So it's a remorse song, but very full of pathos and irony. And it's a beautiful outdoor scene. So you have the fire, there is a bunch of homeless people, warming up. So that's the little fire on the table. There is a beautiful horse, white horse that he touches. So that's a white dog. The entire scene is really very laboriously paying homage to Dusan Makavev.
Would a viewer need to understand those references, or you may take care that they have their own value in your film? In your context?
I think that it's always, it's like, I think I'm trying to be very communicative in what I do, and the communication can be on different levels. It's like, you can meet someone for a cup of coffee and have a 5-minute interesting conversation, but still don't know that they're, I don't know, terminally ill, or their father is an alcoholic or whatever. Things you'll get to know if you know them a little better. So I think art can be a bit like that. It can be experienced more quickly, but then, of course, certain works you can spend a lot of time with, and yeah.
There are questions from the audience.
I will take a look around. If someone raises their hand, I will. Yeah.
I have a question on Tse, because we haven't talked about Tse. Well, we did, but my question is the two actors that the film starts with, the BDSM couple. How did you cast them? Are they real life BDSM enactors, or whatever the word is, subs and dom? And did you, in a dialogue, did they have an influence on how the film was developed? How much did they contribute to that?
Very much so. I mean, the history of this film is strange, because I was in Oberhausen showing another film that I made that year, and an assistant programmer from Venice Film Festival came and introduced himself as someone who liked my work, and said that if I'll make something new, because it has to be world premiere in Venice, he will vouch for it. And I said, I have an idea, but no money and no time. Because all I had was this idea to do, a BDSM exorcism with Lieberman being the demon exorcised. No script, nothing. And it happened that there was a gallerist in Milan who wanted to work with me and said, I can give you 2,000 euros. So I said, okay, 2,000 euros is enough to rent equipment for one day. And then I came back to Israel. I had 3 months to make the film. And I was really lucky, because I found Joanna, this left-wing activist, who's also a Dom, immediately, and she knew my work. And we see eye to eye politically as well. And then Ella was much more difficult to find, took a long time. Now, the whole thing had to be shot in one day. The entire thing, the Talking Heads interview, the BDSM session, and the song in the end. And so the interviews were not written down. There were certain things that I told them I want to convey in the interview, and I wanted this segue from their actual life, and they do speak about their actual life, to the fiction by which one is possessed and the other can use her talents, her gifts as a dominatrix to exorcise a demon. But then some things came out that I could not expect. Like, for example, I didn't know that she was in Moldova, where Lieberman was born. So maybe she was possessed when she was 2 years old, running away from Chernobyl. And the striking metaphor in the end about illegal abortion with a hanger, she came with it herself, She suddenly became very possessive about her demon. And there was also a kind of a real, I think, family vengeance about it, because she does come from a family of Russian immigrants to Israel who are kind of right-wing and racist, as she says. So I think that partaking in this was kind of like a rebellious act. She's very young. So there were a lot of surprises. And with Joanna, she's so incredible. They're both very smart, but Joanna is also an intellectual. I think she's very impressive, and a lot of it is them. It's a combination.
I want to get. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to ask also, seeing you speak before, but just talking about like the work you're doing back in Israel and the views there, and then the right-wing slant of it. You said treason before, and seeing these scenes, or previously you said, it could be seen as treason by some. Seeing these things as well, you're a critical, more left-wing Israeli artist. Just with the slant in Israel now and the right-wing leaning, how is it for you in the creative sphere there, as somebody with no experience to your world?
I must say that maybe I was too dramatic in the panel before because I really don't know what the reaction will be. I know that with many of my projects, there is this fear and lack of knowledge how would the reaction turn out, and sometimes it can be very violent. I personally experienced only once a real political scandal, life threats, and that was with a work pertaining to the Holocaust. It was called Live and Die Zeba Brown, and it was inviting you, the viewer, to become Hitler's lover, and that was in the 90s. So it was a period where the Holocaust was a real political issue, and there were people who monopolized, this issue. Of course, taking for granted that we are the victims, we have been, we survived, and Israel is the result of that survival, etc., etc. So coming to terms with the potential victimizer within you was not something that at that point was acceptable in the Israeli discourse. But I also think that politicians attack works when they have something to gain. They don't do it because they're really offended often, but because they know that a witch hunt or an attack can help them. So, for example, the Lieberman piece was not attacked maybe because it won the Orizzonti Award in Venice. So they said, okay, let's not deal with it. It's only an art piece. It's another thing that art is kind of esoteric. This is not like mainstream filmmaking or something like that. So I really don't know. I don't know. The Gaza War Tattoos has not been seen in Israel yet. I don't see it personally as a very confrontational piece. I think it is confrontational, it is critical of Israel, but I don't think it's very aggressive but I really don't know. I spoke in the panel earlier about the fact that Israel is really shifting, really changing. So I don't know. I tend to be a relatively cool person when it comes to that. I'm not cool in any other, I'm a very nervous person, anxious and all that. But somehow when it comes to political discourse, publicly, I feel still, most of the time I feel safe. But it remains to be seen, if this feeling is justified or not. I'll know soon enough.
Any other questions? If not, I actually also wanted to get a bit more into the political sphere. I actually wanted to ask exactly that question. But I have maybe more of a follow-up question. For those of you, again, who haven't seen the Gaza War Tattoos, I really recommend that you go see the exhibition and see the work by Roee Rosen. Do you feel that this shift in Israel, and I have to say also globally about Israel, about Palestine, do you see it also as affecting your work, the work that you do? Do you see yourself, out, I feel like is a very, I want to say controversial. It has a very strong stance it makes. Do you see yourself still doing films like this, or did this current politics change the way you see art, maybe your position in art, or how?
I think I changed with reality. Reality affects me deeply, not only political reality, but also, medical reality, romantic reality. Like all of us, I think, we are affected by a layering. Our identity is not one, it's fragmented and made of different roles we play in different places, and they're all affecting me. And part of it's both a pleasure and a curse to be someone like me who never knows what would be the next thing, what would be the medium. It's a pleasure because there is a kind of the constant horizon of potential surprises, but often it's also a curse because I always feel irresponsible, to my painterly self, to my. For example, when Out won Venice, which was a big thing, it was really like the prime moment to make a film, and then I began a huge text and image, project that took 5 years, which was Vladimir's Night. So, and also currently, I cannot think, I would love to do a film, but I just cannot see myself currently doing it. I don't have an idea or or a reason, like a raison d'être, like I could not have imagined, that I would do photographs of tattoos. It's something that pops up in that particular case in a conversation, and then it can sometimes it evolves and grows. Often, in my case, evolves. Often the projects become much more entangled and complex than I planned them to be. I think, okay, this is going to take 3 months, and it ends up taking 7, 8 years sometimes. So I don't. The answer is I don't know. I mean, but I don't think it's only the politics. It's a whole. The politics, I think, are so extreme right now that almost every Israeli I know from my circles is really contemplating leaving the country. And it's not easy. I mean, I was born in Israel. My mother was born in Israel. My father is an immigrant, is a Holocaust survivor. But also my children have been born there. So the thought of leaving is not an easy thought. But it's almost unavoidable at the current climate. So in that sense, as a human being, more so than as a producing artist, I feel like the last year has been really devastating. Also morally, I mean, it's a kind of exasperation. You see something totally incomprehensible, unfurling in front of your eyes, and there is little that you can do effectively. The question of effectivity came up in the questions of, that have been asked for this exhibition. So.
My question connects maybe to that. Let me introduce it. The most interesting, or a very interesting part of films, I always find the end credits. So I've been looking at all your end credits. And it strikes me, and I'm not an expert in last names, but most of the people that you work with are Israeli, Jewish. What does it say about the art scene in Israel, about how you organize your work? Wouldn't it be one way to kind of bridge gaps, to do more things in collaboration, which, as far as I know, you have not done, but maybe that's not the way you work. Could you respond to that?
Yeah, well, it's a very good question, and I feel like it's an open question. It's not trying to apologize or to say anything to counter, because I think that what you point at is absolutely true. The cultural scene is, for the most part, the hegemony is Jewish Israeli. That is to say, there are a lot of Palestinian Israelis, Palestinians who are citizens of Israel. And in fact, I teach in a college where more than 25% are Palestinians. Some of them are devout Muslims, so very interesting. I spoke about fragmentary identity, women who are at home, wearing the hijab and are very devout, and then at school would make very transgressive, sometimes erotic work. Really interesting. And some of those people have become colleagues or friends, and they also here and there appear in the work. I would not name names here, but even in the Gaza war tattoos, there is a Palestinian presence, one of the bodies. And it is true, on the other hand, you raise another question, which is the question of collaboration versus, kind of DIY practices, which I grew up doing mostly. I think basically because I felt incompetent with production and fundraising. I was very bad at that. So I always could lean back on painting and writing, doing something that would be epic, but I could produce it all on my desk, And beginning to make films, which for me was late, I was past 40 when I made my first film, was tremendous in terms of the collaborative aspect of it, because films are always collaboration. And so, yeah, I mean, without the music of Igor Kotogolov, the Dust Channel would not be what it is. And I collaborated with him also in my last film, Kafka for Kids, which is a musical comedy, which also has a political bent. Yes, so those collaborators often are people that Max Lomberg, who's not only the editor of the films, but often also a kind of a collaborator in an intellectual sense. But it's two different questions. One has to do with collaboration versus, and the other with the Palestinians within the Israeli art scene, and there it's a painful issue. I made a film called Marseille Jamila, which I never show, or almost never show. Beautiful Marseille, which is a kind of workshop piece. We collaborated, me and other artists and students, many of whom were Israeli Palestinians. And the film is made of three parts. The middle one, which I instigated, is a kind of touristic information for the city of Marseille, but shot in Jaffa, shot in Israel. And the two cities are Mediterranean, they're kind of similar, they have Arab contingency, and me and the other teacher play a Muslim couple strolling supposedly around Marseille, it's all in Jaffa. And the third part of the film is a kind of documentation of the class discussions, which is more the other artist, Rotisela, this is something that she often does. And there you really get to be exposed to this sense of lack of equality. It's a class of very nice people, both the Jews and the Palestinians, and they both want to feel good with each other, but the Palestinians are much more silent, and the language of teaching is not their native tongue, it's Hebrew, and it really comes out, this kind of not really being at home. And the last year, of course, was also devastating in that sense. We spoke about, Umaya comes from Israel. She's an Israeli citizen.
She was one of the panelists in this panel.
Yes, panel that some of you, I think, were there. And it's a place where it's like different layers of xenophobia and racism and apartheid, because Israeli citizens, the Palestinians as well, have all the rights that supposedly the Jews have, but not the same privileges. And when October 7th happened and then the war, many of them felt really threatened. It's also, it's an art school, and as you know, many of the victims on October 7th were, people in a rave in the South. So many of them knew people who died. So the anger was real and was personalized, and luckily it still exists. It was, year ended up being, possible to teach, and to teach both Arabs and Israelis, but it's all very, very tricky and very thorny. Yeah.
Thank you. If no one else, we have time for one question. Yeah? I can just yes.
Well, we prefer you to have the mic.
Okay.
I think it's recorded, so if you don't mind.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much for the interesting talk and the screening. I feel that in both of your work, there is a big part that is given to sexuality and to female and queer sexuality. So I wanted to know sort of how do you approach sexuality in your work, and why do you choose to entangle it with politics? And yeah, this representation of fantasy and desire.
You're absolutely right. I guess I'm a traditional Freudian in the sense that I see libido everywhere. I think that everything has an erotic dimension. And I think that as Joanna, the dominatrix, said in Out, there is always a dimension of power in intimacy. So for me, those layers in which the political is implicated in our ways of desiring, in our notions of beauty, is always very interesting. What else can I say about it? I know that I'm kind of abstract and vague in what I say now because the question is so big. Yeah, yeah, libido for me is it's also, I think, art for me is libidinal. Art is about seduction and about beauty and about standing out. There's, like putting more makeup on. So, think of an art fair. It's like a brothel, different artists fighting for attention. So that's a vulgar manifestation of the need to grasp attention and to lure people in, and then to maybe to deal with something more problematic. Or so I'm often thinking about it in that sense, something that would be seductive. Yeah, and beauty is something that is really important for me. Like beauty is a value, but beauty is something that is not universal or objective, but, think of Leni Riefenstahl, of Nazi beauty, pure beauty. It is beautiful. I mean, Triumph of the Will is a very beautiful film. But beauty has, has qualities that are, that tell you of ideals, of perception of power, etc. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Roee Rosen. Thank you, Aryon. And thank you to the audience. Yeah, we can continue the conversation at the bar. I assume that's where we're all heading. But in a few minutes, there will be another panel in the main hall called It's the Media Stupid. Do you want to say a few words, or should we just leave it?
Yeah, it has Mike from the Yes Men, and it has also Joyce Overhill, a Utrecht-based artist, and Tinkerbell, a Dutch artist. And it's all about artists with some kind of activistic agenda, maybe how they can make use of media to get their message across, how that is different from now, from 20 years ago. I think it's a very exciting panel, so I recommend you to go there.
Thank you, everyone.